Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. I am super excited for today's video. It is going to be my fourth update in the No Pan Left Behind project that I'm doing on my channel this year. Instead of the Pan Those eyeshadows, I have just found in years, most recently the last like year and a half, 2 years, because I've had more fun experimenting with eyeshadow and bringing more palettes into my collection, I was getting the Pan Those eyeshadows project that I had done in the past and loved just wasn't working for me anymore. And I felt like a large portion of my, whether it be my palette collection or just the majority of the shades in each palette in my collection were going unused. I wanted to do something different. So I decided to do the No Pan Left Behind project, which means that every single month I have 4 palettes that I'm working on, and in order to complete a palette I need to use every single shade in that palette at least one time. And I've really loved doing this project this year because it's really forced me to try and create whole looks with palettes, whereas in the past, for some reason, and I think it's because I would always be trying to pan like 5 different shades from different palettes, I wouldn't necessarily put a look together from a singular palette. I don't know if I'm making any sense. And I've just had a lot of fun doing this project, getting more use out of different shades, stepping outside of my comfort zone because I'm trying to create a singular look with a palette. It's just been going well for me. I have 2 palettes that I'll be rolling out today, which I'm excited about. So we'll be rolling in 2 new palettes. And if you are interested in my update, stay tuned. First, if you have yet to subscribe to my channel and you like project panning content or just chit-chatting about makeup, I'd love if you'd consider subscribing before moving on. And other than that, let's jump into the video. All right, you guys, before we jump into it, I actually want to utilize this project to share with you any sort of eyeshadow pans that I've hit this year, and just kind of keep that going forward. The majority of the pans that I have hit this year have been out of my sultry palette. This is my Pan That palette. I am doing a Pan That palette this year, just not No Pans Left Behind. So I'll leave this video linked down below. But I also have a few other shades that I have hit pan on. And then quickly to note, before today's update, I have completed 7 palettes, No Pan Left Behind style. That's not including any new palettes that have come into my collection. So any new eyeshadow palette that comes into my collection, in order for me to consider it a palette for me to review, I want to use each shade at least 1 time. Realistically, I try and reach for each shade in that palette 3 times. So I don't count new palettes towards the completed, even though I have No Pan Left Behind did them. But this is just 7 completed palettes that were in my collection before the beginning of 2023. I feel like nothing I said just made sense, but whatever. Let's get into the pans that I have hit this year, and this is gonna be a little bit of a spoiler. I tried to franken a shadow, you guys. So there is a pan in a shade that you wouldn't have recently seen in my most recent Pan That palette update. The frankening did not go that well. But I have hit 7 eyeshadow pans this year, and I would love to challenge myself to average 2 pans a month. So I'm a little bit behind in that sense, especially considering 2 of the pans have come from this frankening process. But in my mind, that's kind of what I'm thinking. So here is my ABH Sultry palette. The pans that I hit this year, I did hit a pan in Rose Quartz this year, right here. I did hit a pan in Birch this year. And then I did hit a pan in Teak right here. And I tried to franken this slate shade. So I do have a pan in slate, but it was because I frankened a shadow, which I'll show you that shadow here in just a moment. So 4 new pans from this palette alone. Then I also hit pan in the shade Pink Opal right here out of my Kat Von D Alchemist palette. I hope you'll be able to see it. Super reflective. I already had a pan in the shade Ultraviolet, and I actually had a pan in the shade Blue Sapphire, and then that shade broke and I repressed it. So I still need to hit pan in this shade again, and I'm so close to Green Emerald. So hopefully I can hit pan in Green Emerald by the end of the year, but I did add 1 pan to my collection there. Most recently, I also hit a pan in my Oden's Hela palette, and I did hit a pan in the shade Double Sided. I, again, don't know if you'll be able to see it because it's so reflective, but this is that sort of duochrome shade. It has like a pinky, yellowy, golden flip. And I told myself, so I did a video, 23 eyeshadow pans I want to hit in 2023, or 23 palettes I want to pan, or 23 palettes that I want to hit one pan of eyeshadow in 2023. This was one of them, and I'm super excited. Because of the way the shade is, it's like, is it pan or is it not? It is pan. It definitely is pan, which I'm super excited about. And I'm excited to continue to reach into this palette. I do want to pull out and create a look with the shade Hellfire sometime in the next month or so. But one new pan in this palette. I just realized, you guys, I actually have 8 pans that I've hit this year. So I was wrong when I gave you the number 7 at the beginning, which actually means I'm on track if you consider that we're not through May yet, in terms of hitting 2 eyeshadow pans per month. I did hit pan on this single shadow right here. This is in the shade Atlas by Terra Moon Cosmetics. Again, super reflective. Hopefully you can see that pan. And then the last pan I have to share with you comes from an ABH Jackie palette. And this was part of the frankening process. So I don't know if you consider that a true pan or not, but I do now have a pan in this shade right here, which is the shade Big Wig. I wanted to create like a periwinkle purple shade and didn't realize that like that dark purple mixed with like a medium mid-toned gray was not going to create a periwinkle purple. And also just me frankening the pan, it just didn't go that well. This is the shade that I have, and definitely a lot of product was lost in the process of doing this. I have not yet tried this on my eyes. I mixed in a bit of a white shade out of the Stone Cold Fox palette by ColourPop. But there is the shade swatch right there. It's looking a bit patchy. We're gonna, eventually we're gonna try this on the eyes and see how it goes. But yeah, that was the frankening process. So 8 eyeshadow pans, and I will update with any new pans that I hit in May for the next update. As mentioned at the I have 7 completed No Pan Left Behind palettes. Those will be down in the description box in case you're interested in seeing the palettes that I've already completed. But I have 2 more that I have completed, so I'll save those for last. Let's talk about the Danessa Myricks Lightwork Volume 2 palette. This rolled in last update, and I've only reached into this one time for one shade, and that was the shade Polaris. So this has not gotten a ton of use, but this is something that I will keep pulled all summer long, because this is, I don't want to repeat myself as I've talked about this palette at length, but this is just such a fun, unique palette, especially for the summertime. I don't know, I just feel like I play around with color more in the spring, summer, so I'm not mad that this is not getting rolled out. I know I'll get a ton of use out of that, but that's where we stand there. And then I have my Natasha Denona Retro Glam palette, and I've actually used more of the shades in this palette than I anticipated I would have. I will post a picture on the screen of how many times I used each of the shades. There's only one shade that I've used more than once as of right now, and that's actually this shade right here, which is not a shade that I like would have thought I would have reached into multiple times within this palette. I would have believed if you said like Oscar or Flutter, but alas, this one I've reached for twice. I have created 2 looks with this palette. I've reached into this palette 2 times since rolling it in. And again, I will have that picture to share of which shades have been used how many times and which ones I still have left to use in order to complete this palette. I have talked a little bit about being a little bit burnt out with cool toned looks. I don't want to say I'm going to struggle. I mean, I am actually really excited to like create a look using like these shades. And actually it was my whole collection project pan video that I most recently uploaded. I created a look using this palette. I created that look using this palette. And when I started that look, I'm not sure what exactly I had in mind, but I actually loved the way that that look turned out. And I have enjoyed my time using this palette. I'm excited to reach into Flutter some more. I think I'll love Oscar just because I've been like kind of itching for like a satin taupey sort of shade, and I'm excited to like play around with the blue greens in this palette a little bit more, hoping that by the next update this will be a rollout. But I've enjoyed the 2 uses that I reached for that. And then let's get into the 2 palettes that I have completed. I finally completed my Huda Beauty Rose Quartz. This rolled in, I think, in update number 1, and I finally completed this. I actually had a ton of fun when I really buckled down to like complete this palette. So I ended up reaching for this palette a total of 9 times since rolling this in, and I will again post that picture on the screen of how many times I've used each of the shadows, because there are quite a number of shadows in this palette that I've reached for multiple times. And then after I've posted the picture of how many times I've used each shadow, I will post a picture of what this palette looked like when I rolled this in versus what it looks like today. And I'm really excited to see what the differences look like after 9 uses, because looking into this palette, I definitely just feel like it looks a lot more loved and it feels a lot more loved than it had previously been in my collection. I really enjoyed some of the looks that I created with this palette. In fact, I will try and post as many of the looks that I created with this palette on the screen as well, so you guys can kind of get a feel for what I was creating. Lots of purple looks, but that's okay. And I'm very excited to pull this palette out again in the winter time. But I also just think like the shade Blissful is so beautiful, and then Moon Magic and Energized are shades that I would also be wanting to reach for really kind of any time of year. So we'll see how much more this palette gets used this year, but I am very excited that I was able to use it 9 times and complete it in this project. And then I'm kind of sad this one's rolling out already. This is the Viseart Soleil La Plague palette. It's what I have on my eyes today. I loved creating this yellow look, and I'll be honest, even though this is complete and rolling out, I'm keeping this in my bathroom vanity because I freaking love this palette so much. I will post again that picture on the screen of how many times I used each shade. There are a couple of shades in here that I used twice, and I actually ended up, there was one day I ended up creating a more cool toned look with this palette that I wasn't like, it was right after I got done saying I'm sick of cool tone looks, and then this look just ended up a lot more cool toned than I anticipated, but I loved the way that it turned out. Love this yellow look. Had so much fun creating this. Definitely want to play around with yellow more this summer. This pale yellow right here, this pale matte yellow, I want to use as an inner corner on the eyes with like just a very basic neutral like matte in the crease. That is like a yellow inner corner in the summer is just like my vibe. Same with this really light pale shimmery yellow as an inner corner highlight. I just know I'm gonna get a ton of use out of this summer, so this is going nowhere fast. I did reach for this 3 total times to complete this palette. Super sad that it's complete because it kind of, I don't want to say it gave me that extra motivation to reach for it. This is going in my vanity and it's gonna get a ton of use. But in terms of this project, this is now a completed palette. That being said, we do get to roll in 2 new palettes to work on, which is always the super exciting part. So I'm very excited to see what palettes are going to be randomly generated to use. So that being said, I have my wheel pulled up. I believe this is up to date. No new palettes, and I don't want new palettes that came into my collection this year in this wheel because, as I mentioned, they're already palettes that I would have completed or am working towards completing. So let's see what palette is going to be first. And we get Nabla Dreamy. Ooh, this is a good one because this is a palette that is currently on my chopping block. I loved Nabla Dreamy too. I lost that palette. Like, I literally have no idea what happened to it. And I keep kind of meaning to buy it again, but I have such a large palette collection. I'm like, do I really need to? But the Nabla Dreamy, I just have not been able to get as into. So this will be a really good test to see if it is a palette that I want to keep in my collection, or if it's something I'm gonna be comfortable decluttering. Okay, so that is palette number 1, and then let's see what we get for palette number 2. We get, ooh, Natasha Denona Lila. Speaking of cool toned palettes. Both of these, okay, hold on. Okay, I went and grabbed those 2 palettes, but you guys, I'm gonna randomly generate, I'm gonna work on both of them. I'm not gonna like veto anything, but I'm gonna randomly generate a 5th palette, hopefully like a warmer toned palette to work on, because I want something warm toned. So let's see. Nabla Side by Side. Okay, This is more neutral, so this will work. This will work. Let me grab that palette too. All right, you guys, I grabbed all 3 palettes. So up first, we have the Nabla Dreamy palette. This has 12 shades, and it's not like the most cool tone. Like, I don't feel like every look that I create with this needs to be cool tone. This is what the palette looks like. I'm actually very excited to have a little bit of motivation to reach into this palette and really decide whether or not I want to keep it. This Delirium shade just looks so pretty. Like, I'm very excited to play around with that. But as I mentioned, I just don't get super excited or inspired to reach into this. So this will be a good test of whether or not this will stay in my collection or not. Then we got the Natasha Denona Lila palette, which has 15 shades in it, and it's definitely more of a cool tone palette, but I absolutely love these shimmer shades right here. I also love this shade here, and I feel like this is a palette, and I feel like for me, this is a palette that is, you know, I'm needing this to be a no pan left behind palette because I've never really thought outside the box with this palette. Like, I usually am reaching into this palette just for like 1 or 2 shades, never trying to create a full look with this. This is my oldest Natasha Denona palette in my collection and one of my older palettes in my collection in general. So I'm excited to, again, have that motivation to reach for it. There's definitely some shades in here that just don't necessarily speak to me, like this row, but nevertheless, we'll see what we can create with that, and I'm excited to work on that in this project. And then for a less cool option, I have the Nabla Side by Side palette. I absolutely love this palette. This is one of my favorites. You guys know I love Nabla so much, and I also love this color story. There's some warms, there's some neutrals, there's some cools, there's a lot of variety to be done with this palette, and I'm just excited to reach for this one. It's been a while since I've tried to create a full look with this palette, so I'm actually very excited to, again, kind of like think outside the box with this palette, do things that I've not done before, and just have some fun with it. So we will now have 5 palettes that we are working on in this project. I don't know if I'm going to keep it at 5 if I complete like 2 or more. Next update, we'll see where the tides take us, you know. But these are the 5 palettes that I will be currently working on to complete in this project. That is going to wrap it up for today's update. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know if you are doing something similar to this. What palettes are you using the most? Do you try and no pan left behind your palettes? Would love to just hear what you guys have to say in the comments below. Other than that, thanks so much for sticking around to watch, for supporting me, for supporting my channel. I love you guys so much, and I'll catch you in my next video. Bye.